You've been told that moments like this are accidents, that stumbling into a message on a screen is nothing more than algorithmic chance. But as you sit here now, listening to these words move through your awareness, you can feel something else, an unmistakable thrum that doesn't register as random. It's as if a door that has always been in the room of your life has finally creaked open, not because the door suddenly appeared, but because you finally turned toward it. That subtle recognition in your chest, that gentle charge rising in your skin, is the signal that this doorway is not metaphor only, it is a lived, felt threshold. Take a breath, slow and steady. Inhale as though you are pulling in not just air but orientation. Exhale as though you are clearing the static that told you, for years, you were lost. What is happening right now is not a coincidence. It is coherence. The act of arriving here proves your attention has shifted, and when attention shifts, the whole field reorganizes itself. Quantum scientists describe particles as waves of possibility until they are observed. Then they collapse into one lived outcome. In the same way, you have collapsed into this exact moment, this exact message. Most people rush past these thresholds. They see content, scroll, and forget, treating every moment as disposable. But you sense the difference. There is a pulse, a whisper, a magnetic pull that has curved timelines to bring you into this convergence. You can dismiss it, call it entertainment, or you can pause and admit the deeper possibility that your arrival here is the signature of your own consciousness drawing you to the next version of yourself. Imagine walking down a long corridor. Every door looks identical until one handle glows with a faint light. Subtle but undeniable. You don't know why, but you stop. Something insists you try it. That is this moment. You can feel the pull because part of you has been waiting to recognize the signal, waiting for the resonance of this exact frequency. You have not just clicked on a video. You have tuned into a wavelength that matches what has been stirring within you for longer than you can calculate. Notice how your body responds when you let this sink in. Perhaps your chest loosens. Perhaps a calm spreads through your stomach. Or perhaps resistance rises. That familiar voice whispering that you're overthinking, that none of this matters. Even that resistance is proof that something real is unfolding. Because your older layers of programming always tighten when expansion begins. They fear dissolution, and they mask that fear by trying to dismiss what is happening. But you are not required to obey them. You are required only to notice. This is the first act of attunement, naming the threshold. Until you name it, you can walk past it unconsciously, repeating the same loops, blind to the signal. But once you pause and whisper inwardly, I see the doorway. The whole architecture of your awareness shifts. You shift from passenger to participant. You are no longer simply being carried by currents of noise. You are choosing to step into the stream with clarity. Think of the way a compass needle swings, jittering until it locks onto true north. Your attention has been pulled in thousands of directions by algorithms, opinions, distractions. But right now, in this exact breath, the needle has steadied. You are pointed towards something vast, something that has been calling quietly, waiting for you to finally quiet enough to notice. That stillness, that lock-on, is the moment of coherence. The choice now is not whether the doorway exists, it does. The choice is whether you step through, whether you allow the shift in your chest to mean something. That doesn't require belief in theories or blind faith in unseen worlds. It requires only that you trust what your own body, mind, and spirit are already signaling you are standing at a threshold. This is the initiation of attunement, the pivot where randomness dissolves and recognition begins. Take another breath. Feel the air carry through you like a current connecting you to the unseen grid of possibilities. As you exhale, imagine yourself letting go of one old story about accident and coincidence. Replace it with a gentler truth. I am not lost. I am guided. I have arrived exactly where I need to be. Say it once, and the resonance takes hold. Say it twice, and your nervous system begins to believe it. Say it 3 times, and the door before you swings wider. This is not the end of the journey. It is the invitation. From this moment on, you will see patterns where before you saw chaos. You will feel nudges where before you felt silence. You will remember that being here is not passive consumption, it is alignment. The field is listening, and by recognizing the doorway, you have already answered its call. Pause for a moment and consider this. If quantum consciousness is our natural state, why do so many spend their entire lives never glimpsing it? The answer is unsettling, yet liberating. From the earliest days of your life, a script was handed to you, family, teachers, peers, and the wider culture fed you definitions of what was real, what was normal, what was safe to desire. Each line of that script narrowed your field of perception, shrinking the infinite into the manageable, compressing possibility into predictability. As a child, you knew how to sense more. You imagined with freedom, felt energies adults could not name, created entire worlds without fear of being wrong. But slowly, gently, insistently, you were told to stop, be realistic, pay attention, stop daydreaming. Every correction was a shutter closing, each one dimming the natural light of awareness. That wasn't cruelty. It was conditioning. And conditioning is how societies maintain order by pulling infinite beings into finite patterns. Think of it like tinted glasses placed on your eyes before you could protest. You never knew they were there. So you assumed the dull colors and rigid outlines were reality itself. Over time, you stopped questioning. The glasses became invisible, but right now, as you listen, part of you is beginning to reach for the frame, to tug them loose, to glimpse colors that had always been waiting. Here's the pivot. Most people never even suspect the script is running them. They confuse programming for personality. They say, I'm just anxious, I'm just unlucky, I'm just not creative. They don't realize those are not fixed truths, but echoes of the script. The loops repeat, because attention energizes them, and attention, as you've already learned, is the most powerful currency in the quantum field. So how do you begin to unmask the script? The first step is awareness. Audit the phrases you repeat to yourself without thinking. Catch the habitual thought patterns that rush in like background static. This is just who I am, or nothing ever changes. When you hear them, don't scold yourself. Just notice, like a scientist watching data scroll across a screen. Mark them as evidence of conditioning. Next, look outward. Notice the patterns in what you consume: news, entertainment, conversations. These are streams that reinforce the script. Entire industries thrive on keeping you locked in predictable loops of fear, desire, and distraction. That doesn't mean you must reject all of it. It means you recognize what it is: a broadcast. You've been tuning to one station your whole life, not realizing you could change the dial. Family conditioning is trickier because it often comes disguised as love. We just don't do things like that. Nobody in this family has ever succeeded at that. These phrases feel protective, but they act as fences, convincing you that the wider field is unsafe. When you begin to dismantle them, you may face resistance. People may tell you that you've changed, and they won't mean it kindly. Understand that's the script defending itself. Notice also how fear is used as the ultimate control. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of stepping out of line. Fear collapses your energy inward, shrinks your field of vision, makes you easier to manage. When collective attention is captured by fear through headlines, rumors, crises, it strengthens that reality. The field echoes what is fed into it. Fear thrives when you keep watching. But here's the liberating truth. The moment you recognize programming, it begins to dissolve. Awareness drains it of power. The script can only run as long as you believe it is you. When you step back and say, "That's not me," that's conditioning. You shift from character to author. You move from unconscious repetition into conscious direction. Take a breath now and let yourself scan back through the day. Notice one moment where you reacted automatically: anger, doubt, or the urge to shrink back. Recognize it not as failure, but as a clear marker. This is the script running. That recognition alone is a crack in the wall, and every crack lets more of the field's light through. This is why your arrival here matters, because once you see the loops, you can step outside them. You realize that reality has been filtered, not fixed. And when you stop feeding the program, it begins to starve. Old beliefs weaken, old fears lose volume. Space opens. And in that space, your natural awareness begins to breathe again. You are not your conditioning. You are the one who sees it. That difference is everything. Because the observer is not trapped by the program. The observer can write a new one. All your life, the script has whispered non-stop thoughts, emotions, alerts, obligations. You may not even realize how relentless the noise has become, because constant chatter feels normal. Yet beneath that surface storm lies something ancient, a silence more real than the noise itself. Stillness isn't absence. Stillness is access. It's the hidden entry point where awareness slips free from programming and makes contact with the field directly. Close your eyes for a moment, if you can, and just breathe. Inhale slowly, exhale even slower. Feel the body's weight. Feel the pulse behind your sternum. Notice the chatter still firing, the stray thought, the unfinished task, the judgment about how well you're even doing this. Let it all be there. You're not fighting it, you're watching. This is the beginning of finding the gap. Quantum physicists talk about the vacuum field, the apparent emptiness that is actually dense with potential energy. That metaphor maps beautifully here. The gap beneath thought is not empty boredom. It is dense potential, waiting to be touched. When you dip into it, even for a heartbeat, you feel time slow. Your nervous system unclenches. You realize you are not your thoughts, not your reactions. You are the space in which they arise. Imagine standing on a busy street corner. Cars, voices, sirens, chaos. Suddenly, you step into a quiet side alley. The noise is still nearby, but it no longer swallows you. That alley is the gap. Stillness is not the removal of noise. It is the discovery that you are not bound by it. Here's a practice. Set a timer for 3 minutes. Just 3. Sit comfortably. Close your eyes and focus on the rhythm of your breath. Thoughts will intrude immediately. That's not failure, it's evidence the program is still running. Each time a thought arrives, imagine yourself placing it gently on a leaf and letting it drift down a river. Don't push, don't chase. Just return to the breath, over and over. By the end of those 3 minutes, you will have tasted the gap. At first, the gap appears as a flicker, a half second when you realize, oh, I wasn't thinking anything just then. With practice, the flicker lengthens. You begin to dwell in that open space. That's where recognition grows. That's where you sense the quantum field beneath appearances. Your body will confirm it. Instead of tightness, you'll notice warmth. Instead of racing thoughts, you'll sense a widening calm. Some people report tingling in the hands, others a subtle sway as if the body wants to rock. These are not mystical signs, they are physiological evidence that your nervous system is shifting states. You're moving from the noise-driven survival mode into the open coherence of awareness. And something else begins to happen. Once you've touched the gap, external reality starts to respond. Patterns that once hooked you lose their grip. The same conversation that used to ignite anger becomes tolerable. The same situation that used to trigger panic becomes manageable. Why? Because you are no longer drowning in the current, you've stepped back onto the shore. Think of the gap as your secret room. The world cannot invade it unless you invite it in. Each time you visit, you reinforce the path. The neural circuits of stress weaken, the circuits of calm strengthen. The field begins to mirror your inner alignment, showing up as synchronicities, intuitive nudges, and an unshakable sense that you can handle what comes. This is not escapism. This is engagement at a deeper level. When you access stillness, you don't abandon the world, you gain the clarity to shape it. You stop reacting to noise and start choosing from awareness. That is how stillness becomes power, not by removing life, but by positioning you as the one who directs it. So today, claim the practice, just 3 minutes. Tomorrow, 5, then 10, not as a rule, not as a chore, but as a return. Each visit to the gap proves to you again, you are not the noise. You are the space beneath it, and that space is where quantum consciousness meets you with infinite potential. You've heard the phrase before that particles exist as waves of possibility until they are observed, and then they collapse into a definite form. In physics labs, this truth is measured with instruments. But in your life, the same principle is measured through the quality of your attention. The observer effect isn't a distant scientific curiosity. It's a living metaphor for how every moment of focus sculpts the world you inhabit. Imagine holding a flashlight in the dark. The room around you is vast, full of objects and possibilities, but the beam only illuminates what you choose to point it toward. Everything else remains in shadow, not gone, but unseen. Your awareness works in the same way. Wherever you place it, that's where reality takes form. And because the field is sensitive, your focus doesn't just reveal its shapes. Here's the pivot: most people let their flashlight wander unconsciously. They shine it on problems, fears, and past failures without realizing that their attention is feeding those outcomes. They wake up and immediately recall yesterday's stress, replaying it so vividly that today collapses into the same pattern. Then they wonder why nothing changes. The observer effect is not optional. It's always running. The only question is, what are you illuminating? Let's make this practical. Start with a daily spotlight check. Ask yourself, what am I observing right now? If your answer is worry, conflict, or lack, that's the timeline you're energizing. But the moment you notice, you have a choice. You can redirect, like shifting a flashlight from a broken floorboard to a doorway. You can place your focus on what you want to grow instead of what you fear. It doesn't mean denying challenges. If you ignore the broken floorboard, you may trip. Observation is not about pretending. It's about choosing how much energy you feed into each scene. You can notice the problem, acknowledge it, and then decide to invest more focus into the doorway. That's how conscious observers shape reality without being consumed by obstacles. Consider a simple scenario. 2 people face the same setback, a project falls apart. One person obsesses over the failure, replaying every detail, amplifying regret. Their spotlight locks on the collapse, and the field responds by repeating frustration. The other person pauses, breathes, and asks, what is opening because this ended? Their spotlight swings toward new potential, and the field reorganizes. Same event, different observation, completely different reality. This isn't about forced positivity, it's about coherence. When your attention is scattered half on fear, half on desire, the field receives mixed signals. But when your focus coheres, like a laser, the field stabilizes around that vision. Scientists have shown how coherent light can cut through steel, while unfocused light does nothing more than illuminate. Your focus works the same way. To train this, begin with micro moments. Standing in line at the store, notice where your mind wanders. Does it replay worries, or can you shift to gratitude for the simple act of being alive in this moment? When triggered by someone's words, catch the spiral early. Step back and ask, what am I feeding right now? These micro shifts accumulate, rewiring the baseline of your observation. Resistance will rise. Old patterns will insist that your problems deserve endless attention. But you are not obligated to keep shining your flashlight into the same corner. Redirect gently, without self-punishment. Each redirection is a rehearsal for collapsing new realities into form. Over time, you'll notice the field adjusting unexpected opportunities, calmer interactions, synchronicities multiplying. That's not magic. That's the observer effect becoming method, not just metaphor. Here's the deeper truth: you are not only the flashlight, you are also the hand that moves it. You are not just the observer, you are the director deciding what is observed. This is the radical freedom hidden in plain sight. And once you claim it, the loops that once trapped you lose their hold. You stop being a passive character in someone else's script. You begin to write your own. Take a breath now. Feel the weight of the flashlight in your hand. Imagine swinging it towards something you want to grow: peace, courage, clarity, abundance. Hold it steady there. Let the beam concentrate. As you do, you're not just visualizing, you are collapsing a timeline. You are sculpting possibility into reality, here and now. Up until now, you've seen how attention functions as the flashlight that collapses infinite options into one lived path. But here's the pivot. What if the true mechanism isn't just attention itself, but the identity that wields it? In other words, reality doesn't simply respond to what you want. It responds to who you believe you are while you're wanting it. Think of it this way: a beggar and a king could both hold the same coin, yet the meaning of that coin is entirely different depending on who holds it. Identity reframes value. In the same way, two people can set the same intention, but the field listens differently depending on the state of identity behind the signal. If you approach life as a supplicant, constantly asking reality to deliver, you are reinforcing the vibration of lack. But if you approach as a selector, calmly choosing from what already exists in the field, you activate a completely different frequency. This is where your authorship begins. Most people confuse identity with biography. They think they are their past, their failures, their accumulated memories. But biography is only the costume. Identity is the role you choose to embody now. The script you rehearsed in Section 2 may have defined you as fearful, unlucky, or unworthy. Yet the field does not bind you to that script. It reflects who you are being in this moment. So here's the method: each time you notice yourself asking reality for permission, pause. Replace the inner plea. Please let this happen with the stance of selection. I choose this reality because I am the one who authors it. Notice the shift. Your body straightens. Your breath steadies. Your nervous system relaxes. You're no longer waiting. You're choosing. That difference is subtle but seismic. Try a small rehearsal. Imagine two identities. One is the anxious seeker, begging for signs. The other is the calm author, scanning the field and simply saying, "That one." Step into each for a breath. Feel the posture, the tone, the quality of thought. Which one feels coherent? Which one feels aligned with the truth that everything already exists? The more you rehearse the author identity, the easier it becomes to collapse new timelines without struggle. Identity as selector is not arrogance, it is coherence. You're not claiming superiority over others. You're aligning with the principle that infinite versions of you already exist in the field. By embodying the one you choose, you activate its reality. Think of the actor who slips fully into character until even their heartbeat changes. You are doing the same, except your stage is the quantum field, and your performance writes the next scene of your life. Notice how this changes your relationship with effort. When you live as supplicant, life feels like struggle, constantly pushing, constantly convincing. When you live as selector, life feels like calibration. You spend less energy fighting and more energy aligning. And alignment is what the field amplifies. Take a breath now and ask yourself, who am I being as I listen? Am I the one waiting for reality to prove itself? Or am I the one who selects identity and allows reality to rearrange? That single question pulls you out of unconscious loops and into authorship. From here, every micro-choice becomes a rehearsal of the identity you want to stabilize. When you walk into a room, do you enter as someone invisible, hoping not to be noticed? Or as someone whose presence radiates quiet coherence? When you face a challenge, do you shrink into the story of limitation, or do you expand into the selector who knows another timeline already exists? Identity is not fixed, it is a muscle. The more you flex authorship, the stronger it becomes. And as it strengthens, the field bends more easily, not because reality has changed, but because you finally showed up as the one holding the pen. So pause once more, inhale deeply, exhale slowly, whisper inwardly, I am the author. I choose who I am now. Let the words settle into your cells. That declaration is not wishful thinking. It is the act of collapsing into a timeline authored by your chosen identity. And from this point forward, every breath is another stroke of the pen. By now, you've seen how attention collapses possibilities and how identity frames what timeline you select. But there's another layer, often ignored. Yet it may be the most powerful coherence. The field doesn't simply respond to words or surface thoughts, it responds to the signal of your whole being. And that signal is carried not just by your mind, but by the vibration of your emotions and the alignment of your body. Imagine for a moment that your body is an antenna, constantly broadcasting. Every heartbeat, every breath, every subtle feeling sends a frequency outward. When those signals are scattered, fear pulling one way, hope pulling another, doubt scattering the rest. The broadcast is incoherent. It's like trying to tune into a radio station while two other stations are overlapping with static. You can't get a clear song, but when your thoughts, feelings, and posture align into one signal, the broadcast becomes clear. That clarity is coherence, and coherence is what bends reality most easily. Here's the practice. Begin by noticing your emotional baseline. Do you walk through the day vibrating in subtle anxiety or in quiet trust? Your words may speak one reality, but your nervous system broadcasts another. That's why affirmations often fail. People repeat phrases of abundance while their body still trembles with scarcity. The field doesn't listen to the words alone. It listens to the coherence of the whole system. So how do you shift? Start with breath. Inhale slowly, feeling your chest expand. Exhale fully, releasing tension from the belly. This is not just relaxation, it's a physical reset of the antenna. Next, bring in posture. Lift your spine, let your shoulders settle back. Open your chest slightly. Already, the signal shifts. Finally, add feeling. Choose gratitude, love, or calm confidence emotions that carry a high frequency. Don't just think them. Let them fill your body as if you are soaking in light. When these three align: breath, posture, feeling, you broadcast coherence, and coherence attracts coherence. The field recognizes the clarity of your signal and begins to arrange external events in harmony with it. You'll notice synchronicities increase, challenges resolve more smoothly, conversations flow. That's not magic, that's resonance. Think of a tuning fork. Strike one fork, and another nearby begins to vibrate at the same frequency without being touched. Your coherence works the same way. When you stabilize your frequency, you become the tuning fork that pulls reality into resonance with your chosen state. Others feel it too. A calm person enters a chaotic room, and suddenly the room softens. That's coherence rippling outward. This is why spiritual traditions emphasize emotions like compassion, gratitude, and joy, not because they are morally superior, but because they are high-frequency signals that stabilize coherence. Fear scatters, love aligns, gratitude organizes, and the field responds accordingly. Here's a daily ritual each morning. Before engaging with the world, anchor your coherence. Sit, breathe deeply, align your posture, and summon one elevated emotion. Hold it until you feel your body soften and expand. Then carry that frequency into the day, checking back when you feel scattered. This isn't performance, it's calibration. Over time, your baseline rises. The old static panic, doubt, frustration still appears, but it no longer dominates the broadcast. You notice it, adjust, and return to coherence more quickly. And as this becomes your natural state, reality itself bends more fluidly. The timelines you collapse begin to reflect the higher frequency you stabilize. So take a breath right now. Sit taller. Imagine your heart glowing like a steady signal tower, broadcasting gratitude, calm, and strength into the field. Feel your entire body resonate with that signal. This is coherence. This is the language the field understands. And the clearer your broadcast, the more reality will sing back to you in harmony. Every shift invites friction. The moment you begin to reorient your attention, select your identity, and raise your coherence, resistance appears. Doubt whispers, old voices echo. People around you notice a change and sometimes push back. This is not failure, it is confirmation. It means you are moving beyond your old baseline, and the system that held you there is reacting. Think of it like a rubber band stretched between 2 points. As you pull forward, tension builds. The band resists, not because you're wrong to move, but because tension is part of transition. If you mistake resistance for a stop sign, you'll snap back to old patterns. But if you interpret resistance as data evidence that you're moving beyond the familiar, you can reframe it as progress. Here's the pivot. Resistance doesn't mean you've chosen the wrong path. It means the old program is trying to preserve itself. The subconscious doesn't care about growth. It cares about predictability. Familiar discomfort feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. So when you start collapsing new timelines, the subconscious throws up alarms. This is dangerous. Stay small. Retreat. Recognize the voice for what it is, not truth, just a script clinging to survival. Let's make it practical. When self-doubt spikes, this isn't working. I'm just imagining things. Pause. Breathe, place one hand on your chest, and remind yourself, this is resistance speaking, not my deeper self. That simple separation keeps you from fusing with the doubt. The moment you observe it rather than identify with it, you regain your power. Social resistance can sting even more. People close to you may say, "You've changed," and their tone won't be celebratory. They may feel threatened by your shift, because your coherence shines a light on their own loops. Understand their reaction is not about you. It's about their discomfort with expansion. Meet it with compassion, but don't shrink back to soothe them. If you collapse your field to fit their expectations, you return to the very loops you worked to escape. There's also the subtle resistance of distraction. You sit to practice stillness, and suddenly you remember every chore. You commit to observing consciously, and your phone pings 10 times in a row. Distraction is resistance in disguise, a system designed to scatter your coherence. The counter is not willpower alone, it is ritual. Turn off notifications during your practice. Protect small windows of time as sacred. Anchor your focus before you step into the noise. And then there's skepticism, not just from others, but from within. The rational mind demands proof. Where is the evidence that the field is listening? This is where humility helps. Admit that you don't need to turn metaphor into lab science to benefit. You don't need perfect equations to know that focus changes experience, that coherence alters outcomes. Treat skepticism as a sparring partner, not an enemy. Let it sharpen your discernment without paralyzing your practice. Here's a rescue protocol for resistance. 1. Notice the spike self-doubt, pushback, or distraction. 2. Name it. This is resistance, not reality. 3. Neutralize with breath slow, deep, deliberate. 4. Navigate back to your chosen frequency gratitude, calm, clarity. Each time you run this protocol, resistance loses some of its hold. You're training yourself not to collapse under friction, but to stabilize through it. And as you stabilize, the field mirrors your steadiness. Remember, growth without resistance is fantasy. Every forge requires heat. Every ascent involves thinner air. But what once felt like barriers eventually feel like markers, signposts proving you are leaving the old terrain. So when doubt rises, when voices question, when distractions multiply, don't curse the resistance. Thank it. It means the shift is real. Then step through it with clarity, knowing that friction is not the end of your path. It is the texture of transformation. Every day offers 2 golden gates, where your consciousness is more fluid than usual, moments when the mind is softer, the field more accessible, new patterns easier to anchor. These windows are the first minutes after waking and the last minutes before sleep. If you learn to treat them as rituals instead of routines, they become portals that rewire your baseline and stabilize your shift into quantum consciousness. Morning first, the second you open your eyes, your brain is still steeped in theta waves, the same state linked to imagination, intuition, and dreamlike plasticity. Most people waste this state by grabbing their phone, scrolling news or messages, instantly flooding their system with fear, distraction, and comparison. In doing so, they collapse their day into someone else's broadcast before they've even stood up. But you can choose differently. Here's the practice before any external input. Place one hand over your heart and take 3 deep breaths. With each inhale, imagine pulling in fresh light. With each exhale, release yesterday's static. Then, visualize your chosen identity from Section 5, the author, not the supplicant. Picture yourself moving through the day with coherence. Feel it until your nervous system registers it as real. This simple ritual programs your antenna for the hours ahead. It's not just mindset, it's frequency alignment at the most impressionable moment of your day. Now the evening window, as you drift towards sleep. Your consciousness loosens from linear thought and begins to wander in symbols, images, and fragments. Most people end the day replaying worries, scrolling until exhaustion, or numbing themselves with noise. In doing so, they hand their subconscious a script of fear or chaos to rehearse all night. But your subconscious is the stagehand that cues tomorrow's reality. What you feed it before sleep is what it rehearses. So here's the counter ritual before closing your eyes. Revisit gratitude, not as a vague idea, but as a felt inventory. Whisper to yourself 3 things from the day that carried light, no matter how small. Then, imagine one scene from your desired timeline clear, vivid, embodied. Don't just think it. Let your body feel the relief, the joy, the calm of already inhabiting it. As you drift, your subconscious continues to weave that signal, rehearsing it until morning. Together, these rituals form a loop. Morning primes you, evening recodes you. Over time, they carve grooves in your consciousness deeper than old programming. And because they happen at the 2 most malleable points of your cycle, they require less effort than any midday practice. They work with your biology, not against it. Think of them as bookends for your day. If the middle hours are messy, noisy, or even chaotic, it matters less because you've anchored the start and sealed the end. The field doesn't require perfection, it requires coherence. And coherence is strengthened each time you use these windows to align. Practical tip: attach the rituals to something you already do. In the morning, link it to your first sip of water. At night, link it to turning off the light. That way, the ritual becomes automatic, not another task on a list. You'll know it's working when the texture of your days begins to change. Mornings feel steadier, less frantic. Nights feel calmer, less restless. Synchronicities multiply, as though the field is meeting you halfway. That's because it is. The broadcast you stabilize at the edges of sleep and waking ripples outward, collapsing timelines that match your signal. So pause now. Imagine tomorrow's first breath. Imagine tonight's last thought. These are not throwaway moments, they are levers. And when you use them deliberately, you discover that reshaping reality isn't about force. It's about precision. It's about honoring the windows when the door to the field is already open. As you stabilize your practice shifting identity, raising coherence, guarding the ritual windows, the field begins to answer, not with trumpets or fireworks, but with subtler signals, synchronicities, patterns that thread through your days. These are not accidents. They are feedback. The field's way of showing you that your broadcast is being received. But here's the caution: if you read them through superstition, you distort them. If you ignore them, you miss your compass. The task is to read them cleanly. The first category of feedback is synchronicity, the seemingly impossible alignment of events, numbers, words, or encounters. You think of someone you haven't seen in years, and they call. You wrestle with a question, and the answer appears on a billboard or in a stranger's casual remark. These moments feel scripted because, in a sense, they are scripted by the coherence between your attention and the field. The second category is inner state. As coherence rises, your nervous system starts behaving differently. You notice calm where there used to be panic, curiosity where there used to be defensiveness. That shift is not small, it's proof your baseline is changing. The field isn't only about external outcomes, it's about your internal broadcast. When the signal cleans, the inner weather clears. A third form of feedback comes through intuition. Nudges grow sharper, you sense which invitation to accept, which door to walk through, which voice to trust. Intuition stops being a faint whisper and becomes a steady inner compass. This is the field aligning your awareness beyond calculation. Logic alone could not compute these leaps, but coherence delivers them. Now here's the danger when synchronicities flood in. The old program wants to hijack them. Ego might claim, "I'm special. The universe revolves around me." Fear might claim, "If the signs stop, I've lost it." Both distortions collapse the clarity. Signals are not about inflating or deflating your worth. They are simply feedback. They tell you, yes, this frequency is stabilizing. Nothing more, nothing less. The clean way to read feedback is with curiosity. Keep a journal. Note the synchronicities without exaggeration. Record the calm moments, the intuitive hits, the subtle dissolving of old limitations. Treat it like data. Over time, patterns emerge. You'll see confirmation clusters, 3 or 4 events pointing in the same direction. That's not coincidence, that's coherence compounding. One common distortion is confirmation bias, seeing what you want to see in everything. That's why journaling helps. When you step back and review weeks of notes, you can distinguish genuine feedback from wishful thinking. If you notice repeated alignments across contexts, that's signal. If you stretch meaning into every random detail, that's bias. Awareness of this difference protects your clarity. The more you refine this skill, the more your relationship with the field matures. You stop begging for signs. You start recognizing feedback as natural, as ordinary as a compass needle swinging north. That shift is crucial, because the moment you stop sensationalizing synchronicity, you can use it as navigation, not as entertainment. Another subtle marker of feedback is the dissolving of limits. Blocks that felt immovable quietly soften. Doors you assumed were locked ease open. If you look closely, you'll see the link your signal shifted and the field adjusted. Don't overlook this just because it isn't dramatic. Sometimes the greatest proof is the absence of struggle. So here's the practice once a week. Sit in stillness and review. Ask yourself, what signals have I received? Where has synchronicity appeared? Where have I felt unusual calm or clarity? Write them down. Then thank the field not as worship, but as acknowledgement. Gratitude seals the feedback loop, strengthening the signal. Take a breath now. Recall one recent moment that felt too precise to be chance. Hold it in your mind. Instead of clinging to it, simply smile and say inwardly, noted. That's how you honor feedback without inflating it. That's how you read the signals cleanly. And by doing so, you step more deeply into partnership with the field. You've reached the point where practices have settled into habits, where coherence no longer feels like a performance, but like your natural baseline. And yet, the real test of awakening is not how vividly you can collapse a timeline for yourself. It is how responsibly you carry that power in the collective field. Living awakened is not just a personal victory. It is a stewardship. Think of a stone dropped in still water. The ripples do not stop at the edge of your own life. Every breath you take in coherence, every choice you make from awareness, every timeline you collapse radiates outward into the collective. Others may never know the source, but they feel the wave. The stranger who suddenly relaxes in your presence. The friend who dares to imagine a bigger future because you modeled calm courage. The community that softens because one member refused to collapse into fear. This is the quiet revolution of awakened living. But power without humility distorts. That's why ethics must walk hand in hand with awakening. When you realize that your observation shapes reality, you could be tempted to manipulate, to bend others' paths for your own gain. But the field does not reward manipulation. Coherence built on control collapses in on itself. The truest ripple emerges when your focus aligns with consent, integrity, and service. In simple terms, you don't just ask, "What can I create for me?" You also ask, "How does my signal uplift the wider web?" Stewardship means carrying your awareness paths into the small moments, not just during meditation or ritual, but in the way you speak to a cashier, the way you listen to a loved one, the way you handle conflict. These are microfields where your signal either scatters or stabilizes. To live awakened is to treat each interaction as part of the greater broadcast. It also means guarding against spiritual inflation. Awakening does not make you superior, it makes you responsible. Others may not understand the language of the quantum field, but they are still immersed in it. Your role is not to preach, but to embody. Coherence is contagious, but it spreads best through presence, not persuasion. So how do you live this out? Begin with daily accountability. Each night, ask yourself, did my actions today reinforce fear? Or did they broadcast clarity? Did I collapse into old loops? Or did I stabilize the frequency I claim to live in? This self-check keeps awakening from becoming abstract. It roots it in behavior. Over time, you'll notice that challenges still come, but you meet them differently. Instead of spiraling, you pause. Instead of reacting, you respond. Instead of shrinking, you expand. This doesn't mean perfection. It means alignment. And alignment is enough to bend reality. Living awakened also means embracing paradox. You know the field is infinite, yet you live in a finite body. You know all timelines exist, yet you choose one path today. You know you are both creator and participant, both observer and observed. Holding these paradoxes without collapsing into extremes is itself a form of coherence. Take one final breath here. Feel your body as antenna, your emotions as signal, your identity as selector, your awareness as observer. Recognize that every step you take now is not just personal navigation, it is collective contribution. The field is not waiting for perfection. It is waiting for participation. And by living awakened, you become a steward of possibility for all. This is the invitation and the responsibility to live each day as if your coherence matters, because it does. To carry your awakening not as a badge, but as a quiet signal. To honor the power of observation not with control, but with care. This is what it means to live awakened not apart from the world, but as a luminous thread woven into its unfolding. Slow down now. Let the current of words ease into a softer stream. You've traveled through doorways, unmasked old scripts, tasted stillness, claimed authorship, raised coherence, and learned to read the field's replies. You've walked the path from observation to creation, from programming to authorship, from scattered noise to deliberate signal. And now, the journey asks for something quieter, not more doing, but gentle integration. Take a breath, deep and slow. Notice how your body feels after all this exploration. Maybe lighter, maybe stirred, maybe simply present. Whatever it is, let it be enough, because the shift is not a single event. It's a living process that unfolds breath by breath, choice by choice. You don't need to force it. You only need to return. As you leave this message and re-enter the ordinary rhythm of your day, carry one reminder with you: coherence is built in small moments. It's not the grand rituals alone that shape the field, but the subtle acts of awareness, pausing before reacting, choosing gratitude before fear, breathing before collapsing into distraction. Each tiny choice strengthens the signal. Each tiny choice ripples outward. And remember, the field listens not just to what you ask for, but to who you are while asking. So walk gently as the author, not the beggar. Live as the selector, not the supplicant. Let your presence broadcast the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are both the observer and the creator, both the ripple and the stone. If resistance returns, meet it with patience. If doubt flares, greet it as data. If synchronicities flood in, note them with humility. Everything you encounter now is part of the conversation between you and the field. There are no accidents here, only feedback, only invitations to align deeper. Take one last breath with intention. Whisper inwardly, I am awake. I am aligned. I am present. Feel the truth of those words settle into you like roots. Let them hold you steady. As you step away, carry this softness with you. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to prove it. You simply live it, moment to moment. That is the real shift. That is the awakened life beginning to breathe through you.